Hi, I'm Karisse Hendrick. I am the owner and founder of Chargelytics Consulting and the host of the Fraudology podcast. I have to really thank the content community at FraudCON for inviting me to speak again this year. Although the format is much different, and I really miss not being in Tel Aviv in the warm air. I'm grateful to be a part of this amazing event. I got to attend last year for the first time, and I have to say, FraudCon is a very special event. Uh, so special, in fact, that I actually have an award that I got from there last year. It was my very first award as an adult and in my career for being a legend in e-commerce fraud prevention. So hopefully this presentation doesn't disappoint. So for the context of this story, before I embark into it, I thought it'd be important for you to understand a little bit about me and how I have this perspective. And really, you're gonna walk through a much shorter timeline than I had to solve a mystery that I had earlier this year. So I'm a veteran of e-commerce fraud prevention of over 15 years. I've worked with hundreds of the biggest online companies in the world in several different contexts. I consider a lot of the fraud fighters at those largest companies in the world some of my closest, dearest friends. And when fraud fighters who don't know the answer to a question, they have a question, they don't know who to ask about the industry or how do other people do this, or can I talk to a merchant that has this problem? They ask me. Somebody once referred to me as the search engine of fraud. I'm pretty humble, but I definitely, if I don't know an answer, chances are I know several people that will. So I really pride myself on people connecting and being a hub of a wheel, and everyone else in fraud fighting are the spokes. And really the reason for that is because this industry is emerging. It's really only been around for 15, maybe 20 years at maximum for some of the early entry online companies. But that's it. So there's not a university course you can take. There's not, a lot of things that you can take in e-commerce fraud prevention. So really each other are our closest allies in that. So why fraud prevention is important? For every $1 of fraud that's committed on a website, it costs $3 to that online company. So think of any online company you can think of that accepts payments. If a stolen credit card is used on their website and they don't catch it before the item is shipped and that the money comes from the payment method, whether that's a credit card or an alternative payment method, then that merchant is on the hook for it. And through the chargeback process, through credit card processing, the merchant is actually debited that amount. And what goes into those $3, it's part of the LexisNexis True Cost of Fraud survey. Not enough time to count, but you've lost the item, you've lost the transaction amount, as well as fees and management costs. So that's why it's important, as opposed to some fraud that happens in investigations after the fact. Online, it's really important to stop it before it happens. So up until this year, you could really put online fraud into one of three buckets. Any type of method or tactic done, you could put into one of these three buckets, and that was carding. Online carding using a stolen credit card. Carding is the terminology that the fraudsters use, that they use on darknet monitoring site, or not monitoring sites, just dark websites. And so that's really just the process of using a stolen credit card or using a stolen payment method like a PayPal or something like that. Every country has its unique payment methods. Account takeover, that's when an existing user account is logged into. A lot of times you'll hear regular consumers say, my Twitter account got hacked or this account got hacked. Really, that's account takeover. And that's when it happens at the login. And because a lot of consumers use the same password for multiple accounts, this has made account takeover pretty easy for the bad guys. And then lastly, friendly fraud. This is something that I was on the cutting edge of discovering towards the beginning of the last recession in the US. In 2008 to 2010, we started to see a pattern of people who placed the order, or maybe their child placed the order, but it was on their credit card. They authorized the transaction, or they kept their credit card somewhere where their kid could find it. They would then dispute the purchase with their bank to try to get their money back. It was a way that they would be able to kind of game the system, where I got something, but now I don't want to pay for it. So that was the 3 buckets. So let's dive into this mystery, shall we? The case that did not receive claims. So everything kind of started on this date. I had definitely heard rumblings of this from other companies, but this email is what really started me on my path. So this is an email from a very large fashion retailer in the US who said that they had seen a real big uptick in customers claiming that they did not receive items. In this email, it talks about chargebacks, but they were happening in chargebacks, as well as we learned fairly quickly that this was also happening at customer service as well. So they were asking me, can you share some of the information on this topic and mitigation strategies that you've heard of? Any creative piece of evidence that's proven to reverse the chargeback? Like what can we do? We're drowning in these claims. What can we do? And at that point, I realized this is becoming a pattern. I've heard this type of issue from several large retailers with physical items. And I had also just wrapped up a large consulting project with a well-known international luxury brand that is out of Europe. And they had a lot of these issues as well. And I had created standard operating procedures to really help them curb those claims and curb illegitimate return claims, or people who said that they didn't get the item when perhaps they probably did. And I think it's important to say that there are a lot of people, no matter what country it is, where that this does happen. I mean, the US is probably the biggest, where we have something called porch pirates, people who take, they're not actual pirates, but people who take packages off of someone's porch or stoop when they're not home and the package has been delivered. Or sometimes shipping trucks have issues and a whole pallet doesn't get delivered, or there's things that happen. So that's normal. And e-commerce companies expect that, and they have some levels of that baked in to understand that there's going to be some losses there. But when you start to see those rates really climb up quickly with not a lot of other changes, there's probably something there. And those of us in fraud prevention have learned that when the data starts to do something that we don't expect it to, there's usually a reason. So we try to dive into what it is. And whether you are fighting a specific case as a fraud analyst and you're looking into those details, or whether you're doing something like this, which I kind of fell into, of pulling the different pieces, it's very common for those of us in fraud to dive down that rabbit hole and really want to know more. So of course I thought, well, I honestly thought this was a very quick thing. I thought, okay, yep, they have a problem. I know other merchants are too. And so I suggested, why don't I just host a call for all of you to get on a call and talk about this? Maybe something happened during the holidays that you're all, realizing, since it in the US, our holiday season is in December. And so you can still get chargebacks for 2 to 3 months later. So I thought, yes, I could help. Yes, I could answer some of these questions and tell them what I've done for other clients. But I always lean on the side of collaboration, always, with other companies as well as internally. I've just seen it work so too many times to count, and don't have enough time to tell all the success stories, but there's so many. So I suggested that we hop on a Zoom call, that all of these groups. So I reached out to about 40 large retailers that I knew well and thought had this problem. And a lot of them were some of the biggest in the US as well as internationally. And about 23, I guess that's not approximate, but there were 23 people who joined the first call, about 20 of them. And they really, we're starting to talk about, is this a customer service issue? We're starting to think it's a customer service issue, because if we're not getting these items out to everyone, that's a huge customer experience issue. And it's going to make them want to go to one of our competitors. Like, they really thought that there was a supply chain issue or a warehouse problem, or they were calling their shipping partners. Examples of shipping partners would be UPS, USPS, FedEx, DHL, calling them and yelling at them and saying, what the heck? Like, why are these going up? Why are you not delivering more packages? A lot of companies, they didn't really think it was a fraud issue, but because it was hitting chargebacks, they were involved. So then the next day, so that meeting happened and it was really good. The next day, totally separate from that call, I was the co-host of the online FraudCast podcast, which was talked about quite a bit last year's FraudCON as well. And as a co-host on that with a former cyber criminal, Brett Johnson. And unfortunately, we just wrapped that up a couple of months ago, but I started Fraudology and it's going well. But on the online fraudcast, our episode back in March, we interviewed a low-level fraudster named Jay. I'm using quotation marks, not his real name. And he said something about refunding and how easy it is to refund. And I thought, wait, you can almost hear me on the podcast say, wait, tell me more about that. And I've put two and two together on the spot and thought, this is exactly what I was talking about with the retailers yesterday. We didn't realize that there was fraud happening. So it clicked. It was like I put two and two together. So that night I did some research. I went on to the messaging app that this guy Jay had told me about, where it was all over advertising doing refunds for other people, essentially fraud as a service. I'd never seen that before. And every other attempt, fraud happens by a fraudster, by a criminal first, usually on a stolen card or through account takeover, or even sometimes with friendly fraud. They get the product, they have to get the drop address. It's a whole big thing for them. But then once they have it, they sell it on a third-party site. This is completely flipping it and asking the customer to place the order on their own credit card or prepaid card, etc., and guaranteeing that this service provider can provide them with a refund from that company. These refunders feel very confident because they've studied all of their policies and procedures, that they know that this is that they can provide a refund for them. Now, sometimes they have some parameters on that, and I'll show you in a minute. But so I quickly went on there, took screenshots. This is literally like what time it was on my phone at the time. And I even have little Facebook bubbles of people I was coordinating with on Messenger that I couldn't blur out. But this is just what I grabbed quickly. And I sent it to the merchants along with a pretty lengthy explanation of what I had learned on the podcast, because the podcast episode wasn't out yet, but I wanted to tell them as soon as possible. And I also shared this with them, and this is something very common. I've since seen several of these, and there's a lot of companies that are on some lists and not others. But this is the way that refunders are advertising how they can do their services. So they list the name of the store, the highest dollar amount that they can guarantee a refund for in USD or Canadian in this case. I would say primarily this is happening the most in the US, then Canada, then the UK. I haven't heard a lot of reports of it happening in the EU, but I think that's also because you guys are a lot better at card security than we are, as well as in the Middle East and other areas in Asia too. But in the US, card security is not there yet. So we just kind of have to, it's the wild, wild west over here. So then the notes. So per store, there were some notes, right? Do not pre-sign, do not turn on the device. So that this was for electronics, obviously. Don't sign for the package. For this one, the third one down, you can get a refund, but it's a 2 to 4 week waiting period for a refund. So they're very aware what the merchant policies are on these things. And in a lot of cases, the refunders were claiming did not receive. So the item was not received, which goes right back to what the merchants were seeing, right? But what I've learned since is that there's actually 5 different ways that refunders are exploiting merchant policies. Obviously, did not receive is the very first easy one. That's why they say no signature is better than a fake signature. But there are other ways. So for companies that have cracked down on this one reason, they then go to others, such as returning items that they never ordered and calling to request a refund before that item is opened at the warehouse to get the refund. There's a lot of others, but just for sake of time, there's also a method where they're messing with the shipping labels, and it's appearing to the merchant that the item was returned, but it wasn't. And that's even scarier, and allowing them to actually have limits as high up as $50,000 in some cases for some retailers. So I discovered this and said, hey, a lot of them were on these lists. This particular list was actually much longer. This is just the electronic section. So I, let them know you need to know the problem in order to fix it, right? If you're thinking it's a customer service issue or you're thinking it's a shipping partner issue, but really it's a fraud issue, you're never going to solve the problem. So, giving them that information allowed them to have conversations with their internal teams to say, hey, this is actually a fraud issue. We need to be involved in it. And here's how we can provide our help to other teams, such as customer service and marketing, logistics, supply chain, etc. From March to June, we continued to have those calls and really work together. Anytime I would learn any negative information, I would send it out to this group of merchants. By the way, I never charged for these calls. I never charged for any of these. Yes, I am a consultant, but I'm very grateful to have wonderful clients that take care of me. And then this allows me to help the industry as a whole. And it's something I'm really passionate about. So anyway, I also tried to get the word out. This presentation is another way of getting the word out. I wrote an article for cardnotpresent.com in May saying, I think it was April or May, saying, please, you need to know about this. I've started to do some webinars, podcast episodes, etc. Then I saw somebody that I had been connected with on LinkedIn for a while named Chase Park, who posted about, how we need to switch from the mentality of fraud will happen no matter what to what can we do to minimize this, if not stop it altogether. And he, named a couple of companies and said, this is really bad, guys, like sounding the alarm. And I commented, I've been sounding the alarm on this issue since March, and I've been working with lots of merchants, and, we're trying, but there's only so much you can do. And he said, well, actually, I'd really like to hop on a call. Can we please, I'd like to tell you what I'm working on. So the next day we had a phone call, and I learned that Chase had embedded himself over the last year in these refunding fraud communities. So one reason why this is so prevalent and why it's happening so fast is because these refunders they're working together. So while publicly, and they are publishing those posts with the list of the companies as well as bragging posts, such as this one. They are posting those all over the internet and in social media and places for outside consumers to advertise their services. However, in closed communities, they're sharing their tips with each other. How do you hit this company? Oh, this is how I did it. What are you doing? How are you doing that? Those are very hard to get into. In fact, they're communities that I wouldn't even know how to because they're private. A lot of them are on encrypted messaging apps. So he had embedded himself, and he just opened my eyes to so much. And I wish I had more time to explain so much more of what he's thought, or what he's provided to me. But it has been a game changer and has allowed myself and Chase as well to join forces. I've hired him as a subcontractor for Chargelytics. He also has his own company called Whisper Defense. And we've been able to help merchant clients be able to really know what's being said and how they're being hit specifically. With that intelligence, they're then able to plug those holes. Eventually, we are working with a technology company that I think really has a cutting edge on how to solve this problem on a bigger scale. But that, those things take time. So and they are in the beta phase now, but so they are very fast. Can you tell there is an Israeli company? But they are still, we are still working on that. But in the meantime, we're giving this intelligence to merchants to really help them, especially, for the holiday season. So quickly, just want to walk through very quickly how this happens. And this is something that Chase actually created and shared with me. And I thought it was a really good walkthrough. So say Alex places an order for 2 laptops. He places it on his card, on his information. So it doesn't look fraudulent. This looks like a completely good order. And there's no way for you to telepathically think, this guy's going to call or he's going to hire someone in 3 weeks to say that he didn't get the item or to return something that isn't what he purchased and get the refund from customer service before we have a chance to open it in warehouses, especially with social distancing in warehouses, etc. So places that, he hires the professional refunder, cyber thief in this case, and cyber thief reaches out to that company. Sometimes it's by phone, sometimes it's by chat. A lot of times there's not an inside person in that company. They are just doing their policies, and cyber thief has learned them very well. They're also very good at social engineering. And then finally Alex receives that refund. So we've been continuing to learn more about specific refund methods. We've been hosting these biweekly calls. They're still occurring. We're working with various retailers to provide the intelligence on this refund method. And I have kind of sped through this, but there are plenty of other webinars and resources that I've talked about this problem even more if you're interested in learning more. But really, I hope that you were able to understand the process that I went through to kind of pick up the different pieces and solve this. And I've been able to really sound the alarm for the merchant community, which a lot of them have said that they would never know about this problem otherwise had I not done that. So I'd really like to thank you for your time. Thank the FraudCON as well for hosting me. And this is how you can get in touch with me if you have any other questions. Thanks so much.